Hare Krishna. Please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada and Guru Maharaj. So today we will start a discussion on Mantra 7 of Śrī Īśopaniṣad. Yasmin sarvani bhutanya atma eva bhudvijanatah tatra ko mohakah shokha ekatvam anupashyatah. One who always sees all living entities as spiritual sparks, in quality one with the Lord, becomes a true knower of things. What then can be illusion or anxiety for him? So in the invocation, Om Purnamada Purnamidam, there was the relationship between the original complete whole, Om, which was pointing to God or Krishna, and the material world and the jivas. That they're complete, but also the material world and the jivas are dependent on the Lord. Then in mantra 4 and 5 was the discussion of the relationship between Krishna and the material world, right? And the message that we got there is that Ishwar is inconceivable to our material vision because he is full of apparent contradictions. He is inside and outside, far and near. That's right. So the point is that neither by karma or jnana or by yoga one can approach the Lord, right? So this was a discussion of the relationship between Krishna and the material world. In mantra 6 and 7, the discussion is about the relationship between Krishna and the jiva. So here I'm using Krishna just because as devotees we're very comfortable with it. But as I mentioned, factually speaking, the Īśopaniṣad never mentions Krishna. They always use the more impersonal notation, either Bhagwan or Om, etc. But whenever we can mentally make that note, right? So essentially 4, 5 and 6, 7 are expanding on the relationship between the supreme, the material world and the jivas. And they help in developing a spiritual vision. So mantras 4 and 5, they help in developing equanimity in the context of the material world. So material things that are desirable and non-desirable, events, happiness, distress, etc. And this is the Brahmabhuta platform. Right? So while there may be lack of understanding of the Lord, but there is understanding of the distinction between matter and spirit. And by that distinction, one is not perturbed by the changes of matter. Right? So that is the lesson mantra 4 and 5 gave. Mantra 6 and 7 gave us same message, but in the context of jiva. That one is no longer disturbed by the attachment or the distrust between living entities. So both talk about equanimity. One talk about equanimity with respect to matter, and this is by seeing the distinction between spirit and matter. The second talks about equanimity with respect to jiva, and this is by the Paramatma vision, by seeing the fact that the same soul is accompanied by the worshipable super soul. Mantra 6 talks about Bheda. Right? So if you remember, it said that Anupashyati, the vision is seeing everything in relation to the Supreme Lord, and we discussed that relationship can be between two different entities. So essentially it makes the distinction between the Lord and the material energies, Bheda. Mantra 7 talks about Abheda. So this is this current mantra where the keyword ekatvam is used. Ekatvam, Prabhupada translates as in quality one with the Lord. Right? So between mantra 6 and 7, we are talking about both Bhed and Abhed. That there is difference and there is sameness also. And this is the foundation of the famous Bheda Bhed Tattva that was propounded by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And it is prefixed by Achintya to indicate that it is inconceivable. Also, this training that is given in mantra from mantra 4 to 7, like in mantra 4 and 5, one is trained to see the difference between matter and spirit. In mantra 6 and 7, one is trained to see spirit and matter, essentially Paramatma and matter. Right? But the common denomination is in matter. And the reason is that the conditioned jiva is, that is, even though with respect to the original position, the jiva is a foreigner in the material, but because he's been in the material world for such a long time, that is its area of comfort. They're used to seeing material things, they're used to manipulating material energy. So what the Īśopaniṣad is doing is first training them to see spirit and matter around them. That see the spirit and the jivas that surround you. See the spirit in the material world that is around you. And that trains the person to then have a direct spiritual vision of the Lord, which is presented in mantra 8. Right? So that's how the trend goes. So summary explanation that the essential point in this mantra is ekatvam or oneness. Right? And again, this is the vision of a transcendentalist who is now seeing the qualitative oneness of the soul and the super soul. So in the previous mantra, the vision of the transcendentalist results in tata no vijukpasate, which is without hatred, which comes from seeing everybody in relationship to the Lord. Right? And the point is that when there is relationship, there is bheda, there is difference. Here the vision is described in another way, which is seeing the Supreme Lord and the living entities as having the same spiritual quality. Right? So Srila Prabhupada translates Atma as Chitkarn, or only spiritual. Eva says nothing else, but the Atma is only spiritual. So one who always sees the living entities as spiritual sparks, same in quality, ekatvam or abheda, as the Supreme Lord. And so that's the message given. So analysis of Srila Prabhupada's purport. So he first talks about the oneness between the energy and the energetic. He gives the analogy of fire. Now interestingly, this is one of the key tattvas of Gaudiya Vaishnavism. Right? So if you look at the teachings of Mahaprabhu, even though they are expansive, so many things he spoke about, but it boils down to essentially two fundamental teachings. One, that God is a person. Right? And then it expands into what is the name of that person, what does he like, what are his associates. So it then expands into unlimited iterations. But the root is, first is that God is a person, and the second is that that person has unlimited energies. So these two essentially form the basis of Vaishnava theology, and especially Gaudiya Vaishnava theology. And in Chaitanya Charitamrita, where philosophy is presented at a higher level, we can see how these two fundamental topics, they are able to, from that the whole Gaudiya Vaishnava philosophy appears. So Jiva Goswami uses these two things to in the Tattva Sandarbha, he uses this to establish that the philosophy of Mahaprabhu is bona fide. Right? So in order to do that, he says that he talks about these two things, and then he says the Bhagavatam also talks about these two things. And because Bhagavatam is bona fide and is talking about these two things, Mahaprabhu is talking about these two things, and they're identical, which means by transitivity, the philosophy of Mahaprabhu is bona fide. Right? So then, once the base is bona fide, then everything that is built upon it becomes bona fide. Then the second paragraph talks about oneness in quality, not quantity. Right? Prabhupada gives the analogy of a drop of water in an ocean. The other forms of ekatvam in second and third paragraph, oneness in interest, and the consequence of not following the ekatvams, that separation in interest causes shok and moha, lamentation and illusion. And final recommendation is that one should try to align one's interest with that of the Lord. So since 6 and 7 speak about the Chinta Bheda Ved Tattva, we'll speak a little bit about it. So as I mentioned, the previous mantra talked about Bheda. This mantra talks about Ekatvam or Abheda. So between the two, the Bheda Ved Tattva is explained. Right? And in structure, this mantra is similar to 1854. That Brahma Bhuta Prasanatma na sochati na kankshati. So the impersonalist, they like this a lot. Why? Because of the word ekatvam. That is the essence of the impersonalist philosophy, that everybody is the same. However, one of the keys of understanding the scriptures is context. That is said, before text, context. So a mantra taken out of context can mean something completely different. So when abhed is taken without the context of the bhed that was spoken in the previous mantra, then it is misleading. Right? So it is essentially the cheating propensity, where one cherry picks parts that suits them. Right? Sometimes people do that with Prabhupada's instructions. Like Prabhupada gave different instructions, and they are all in a certain context. Right? So I remember once in the temple discussion, somebody from the temple management was saying that Srila Prabhupada said that make $1 million and spend $1 million, right? And they were using it to justify the fact that the expenses in the temple were skyrocketing, right? They were saying, well, is Lakshmi being used in the service of Vishnu? And Prabhupada said, make $1 million and spend $1 million. So then I was curious. So I went to the Veda base. I looked up where Prabhupada said that. In a letter, that was factual. He said that. But the context in which he was saying was that make $1 million by distributing books and spend $1 million in building a temple. Right? Now that statement is completely different. Right? It was being used to show that one should try and spend all the money that one gets, and that's not what Prabhupada said. And Prabhupada said that essentially spend it wisely in Krishna's service. So even in our day-to-day dealings, context is very, very, very important. So these two mantras, 6 and 7, are taken as descriptions of how a liberated person will see the world according to the context of what has been said earlier. Right? So a liberated person will see Krishna in matter and matter in Krishna. Right? So Krishna in matter is seeing the spirit everywhere, and matter in Krishna is seeing Krishna as various Purushavatars, as Paramatma. So Anupashyata, the same term was also used in the previous mantra. So Prabhupada here expands a little bit more that in the current, so we had discussed how Pashya means to see, and Anu means following. Right? So Anupashya means to see following the footsteps of, and fill in the blank, following the footsteps of what is spoken in the Vedas, following the footsteps of what is spoken by the sadhus. Right? So that was Anupashyata. Srila Prabhupada says that in this mantra, Anupashyata is the vision of both the Madhyam and the Uttam Adhikari. Right? Now, so the Uttam Adhikari is the higher stage than a Madhyam Adhikari. Right? So, how can at different stages they have the same vision? This is because even though the vision may be the same, the way they arrive to the vision is different. For the Uttam Adhikari, he is situated at that platform. Right? So he is naturally situated at Anupashyata. That is naturally seeing, following the scriptures and the other acharyas. The Madhyam Adhikari does not have that vision, but he obtains this vision by the study of the Shastras and by hearing from the Uttam Adhikari. Right? So the Madhyam Adhikari is developing this vision, and the Uttam Adhikari has developed that vision. So the vision of the Uttam Adhikari, while it resonates with that of the Shastras and the other Acharyas, but he has naturally now developed that vision. Right? It's like somebody is learning how to swim, and earlier on, the coach might swim next to the person and this person will mimic that action. Right? And later on, when this person is more expert, the coach stops and the person naturally swims. He does not need the coach next to him to provide the training. So Uttam has so even an expert swimmer still swims the way that the coach was swimming. It's not that when he becomes an expert, he starts swimming in a different way. The only difference is that he swims on his own. So the vision of the Uttam Adhikari, while it resonates with the scriptures and the acharyas, but it manifests naturally. In the case of Madhyam Adhikari, it does not manifest naturally. But he takes shelter, active shelter of Guru, Sadhu and Shastra to develop that vision. Right? So essentially it is borrowed vision. He does not have that vision, but he borrows it from the Uttam Adhikari. Right? And proportionate to his ability to borrow, he becomes free from sorrow and lamentation. So Srila Prabhupada translates Anupashyata in two ways. He says of one who sees through authority, or one who sees constantly like that. So the first is the vision of the Madhyam Adhikari. that they borrow the vision from the authority. And the second is the vision of the Uttamadhikari, who naturally sees that way. So Anupashyata is repeated from the previous mantra to stress importance. It's important to understand that when this focus on seeing is there in the mantra, one should not misunderstand that the mantra is recommending that one should attempt to see the Lord through meditation, yoga, or samadhi, right? Because again, the context is important. The topic under discussion is how to attain spiritual realization. It is not describing spiritual realization in itself, right? So there's a difference that one might tell you, in order to go to this house, this is the navigation, right? And the second is the house itself. So there's a difference in the description of the path to the house and the description of the house, right? So considering that direct realization of the Lord, that is the goal, that's the destination. That comes actually in the next mantra. These mantras are not talking about the goal, they are talking about the path. So one should not confuse this pashyata with samadhi or seeing the Lord in the meditation, etc. The pashyata is always in the context of the path, which means how does one relate to the material world and the conditioned jivas. Right? So here Anupashyata refers to seeing with knowledge arising from scriptures and the acharyas. Interestingly, Ramanujacharya in Śrī Bhāsya, so he explains that the word darshan, seeing or anupashyata, means the object of one's worship rather than seeing or realizing, right? So which means that he translates anupashyata to be deity worship. Okay, so a little bit of understanding of the symptoms of material and spiritual vision. So this is with respect to object, vision, result, and an example. Right? So when the object is material, the vision is material, then the result is bondage. So this is a typical materialist, that they see the objects as material. So they will consider, by material means that they will consider it as for their own enjoyment, right? So with that vision, they will attempt to enjoy it. Example is sense gratification, right? And result is bondage. Now, when the object is material but the vision is spiritual, the result is purification, and the example is yukta vairagya. Right? So devotees try to do that they will try to engage matter in the service of the Lord. Right? And Prabhupada's famous example of how he used his dictaphone. So he said dictaphone essentially is, in one way, it's just matter. It's a machine. But he's using it to dictate commentary on Bhagavatam, Chaitanya Charitamrita, in the service of the Vaishnavas and the Lord. So his vision is spiritual, and the result is purification. And this is essentially the principle of Yukta Vairagya. When the object is spiritual and the vision is material, then it results in offenses. And so, for example, one looks at the deities and considers themselves as idols. made of stone wood. Right? So, uh, in this way, they commit offenses. When the object is spiritual and the vision is spiritual, then the result is ecstasy. Right? So, again, when you see deity and you see the deity as not different from Krishna, or the holy name. Right? So when you see the holy name as completely spiritual, and when you relate to the holy name, then that is the result is ecstasy. So a little bit more on ekatvam. So ekatvam expands into quantitative difference but qualitative oneness. Now, technically speaking, quantitative differences is not a part of the definition of ekatvam. Ekatvam simply means oneness. But this has been introduced because of context. Because the previous verse talked about Bheda, because of difference. Right? So, understanding that every mantra is building on the previous mantra. So, when having spoken about difference, when the topic of oneness is broached, then it is understood that oneness should also include difference. And this is how that is reconciled. That the difference that it is talking about is quantitative, and the oneness that it is talking about is qualitative. Now, the quantitative difference results in the notion that I am insignificant, because the basis of quantitative difference is that Krishna is infinite and the Jiva is infinitesimal. Right? Really speaking, when you get a sense of the magnitude of Krishna's existence, right? How this universe that is beyond one's physical imagination is emanating from a pore of his skin. You get a sense of the greatness of Krishna, and then derived from that is your own insignificance. Qualitative oneness gives this realization that I am not the body, but I am the spirit, because Krishna is pure spirit. So the notion of I am insignificant results in humility for obvious reasons. And the notion of I am spirit results in detachment. More specifically, material detachment. Right? If I am not matter, why should I be attached to matter? So it results in detachment. Now, the danger of this developing on their own is they give unexpected results. So if one simply develops humility, then it results in low self-esteem. Right? That the devotee, from saying that I'm but a speck of dust on your lotus feet, or I'm a worm in the stool, then starts saying that I'm actually useless. I can't really do anything. Right? That is low self-esteem. And detachment without humility results in pride. And so one becomes proud of the fact that how they are not affected by matter. However, if they both come together, that first humility and then detachment, right, then it results in a proper spiritual conception. If detachment appears before humility, then it will not go in the right direction, because the person is already imbued with pride. But if humility appears before detachment, then it takes one in the right direction, that even if one has transient feelings of low self-esteem, when detachment begins to appear, then considering the fact that low self-esteem is a material conception, that goes away. So in the Shishtashtakam, you'll notice that Mahaprabhu first talks about humility. Right? He talks about Trinadapi Sunichena, Tarorivasa Ishne Namani Namanadena Kirtanya Sadhari. And then he talks about detachment. Na dhanam, na janam, na sundaram, kavitam va jagadishkami, amam janmani janmanishware, bhavadat bhakti rahito kitvai. Right? He said, na dhanam, na janam. I don't want this, I don't want that. Right? So first he talks about humility. That more humble than a blade of grass, more tolerant than a straw. Right? And then talks about detachment. How is this relevant to this verse? Because they are both built into ekatvam. That this verse talks about ekatvam, and understanding ekatvam, one develops humility and detachment. And by the development of that humility and detachment, one develops the proper spiritual conception that then helps the person become qualified to have a direct vision of the Lord, which appears in the next mantra. So Srila Prabhupada explains ekatvam in three ways. Oneness in relationship, that the energy and the energetic are one. And so there is that oneness, that the energy cannot exist without the energetic. Then oneness in quality, that both the Lord and the Jiva, they are Sachidananda. And then oneness in interest, that when the Jiva aligns the interest with Krishna, it results in real happiness. So oneness and in relationship is between Krishna and his energies. And the example that is given is that the fire, at one point, it spreads out its light over a much wider area. Right? We used the same example earlier on, that the light is completely dependent on the fire. They are one, but they are also different. That without the fire, there will be no light. But the fire doesn't depend on light. So that is the nature of the ekatvam that is described. Then the sun and its aspects, right? So considering that sun god is Krishna, and considering that the fiery radiance, which is the corona of the sun, is Krishna's Swarup Shakti, or the spiritual world, considering that the rays are the Tathastha Shakti, or the Jiva, and considering that the reflection is the Bhairangi Shakti, or matter. So this is a metaphor that helps us understand about the oneness in relationship. That from Krishna, so ultimately from the sun god, all this is coming. The fire, the radiance is coming, the sun rays is coming, the reflection is coming. Right? They're all dependent on the sun. So in that way, they're the same as the sun. But also, they're dependent on the sun. So similarly, from Krishna comes the spiritual world, Krishna comes the Jiva, from Krishna comes the material world. Then oneness in quality, right? But difference in quantity. Prabhupada gives the example of the ocean and the drop of water. And he says that if you take a drop of water, it is chemically the same as the ocean. It will have the same composition. It will be water with salt and whatever else is there. But the difference is that you can hold a drop of water in your palm. You can drink it, you can blow it away, you can do anything to it. But you can't do that to the ocean. Right? So similarly, in the scriptures it's talked about how Krishna, even though he is spirit, all the jivas are spirit, but there is a difference in the quantity, and here it is quantified in terms of his opulences. That only Krishna has 64 opulences. Lord Vishnu has 60 opulences. So 4 opulences that are unique to Krishna, like his Leela, his flute, his beauty. So there are 4 opulences that are unique to Krishna. Then Lord Shiva, he has 55 opulences, right? And everybody else, from Brahma to the Jiva, they have 50 opulences. So all the Jivas, now in case of Brahma, those opulences are fully manifested. In the Jivas, they are mostly covered. But because ultimately it's a Jiva who occupies the position of Brahma. It does not go through any transformation. It's just that he becomes more aware of his potency. So this is a more quantitative understanding of how there is similarity in quality but difference in quantity. Then Prabhupada talks about oneness in interest. Rama Sugrivayor Ekyam. That there is oneness in Ramayana. It is said there is oneness of Ram and Sugriv. Right? But that oneness is not that Sugriv is the same as Ram. Essentially what it means is that they had the same interest. That Ram was interested in rescuing Sita and killing Ravan. Sugriv was interested in exactly the same thing. And so there was that oneness. So in the Vedanta Sutra, Krishna is described as Anandabhayo Bhayahari. That he is always enjoying. That is his nature. So that is the oneness of interest between the Jiva and Krishna. Krishna is Anandamayo Bhayahari. The Jiva is Anandamayo Bhayahari. Right? Now the oneness in interest does not mean identical interests. Right? Then things would be very boring, right? Very monotonous. That if everything that Krishna wants, the Jiva wants, right? It would not be, that variety would be missing. But the oneness in interest can also be manifested in diversity. So the example that is given is in the Rasa dance. All the gopis, they had the same interest. So oneness in interest was that they wanted to please Krishna. Right? They had the same interest, but in each one of them it manifested a little differently. And so it's not that they had the same interest, so they were doing exactly the same thing. And so it's mentioned that some jiva, some gopis, they were fanning Krishna. Some gopis were putting tambul in his mouth. Some gopis were massaging his feet. Some gopis, actually Krishna was giving service to them. So there was a whole gamut of interaction that were going on. So there was diversity, but it was unified in interest. That regardless of whatever they were doing, the gopis had the same desire to please Krishna. Right? And that is what is the instructions for the jiva also. That there should be oneness in interest, right? Not singular interest, but in the spirit of the interest. And Prabhupada uses the metaphor of the river and the ocean. That when the river enters into the ocean, it's not that the river is merging with the ocean, but one can understand the river is meeting with the ocean. So this is seen from the two verses are quoted. One is from the Lord's perspective, and one is from the devotee's perspective. Right. So from the Vishwanath Chakravarti says that the river holds nothing back, and nothing can hold the river back. Right? So when the devotee is meeting the Lord, then there is no division in the interests. The devotee has only one interest, which is to serve the Lord. And when the devotee is in that position, then the Lord makes sure that nothing holds the devotee back. So this is the Lord's protection for devotees. So that is ekatvam. That both the interest of the Lord and the devotees are united. The devotee wants to meet the Lord, and the Lord wants the devotee to meet him. So they are united in interest. So as I mentioned, that this mantra is also used by the Mayavadis to show that the goal is ekatvam, or merging, or monism. Right? So the word ekatvam does not mean only one entity and nothing else, but rather one entity with everything else as its attributes. And there is a substantive commentary that is given by acharyas on this, which is beyond the scope of this discussion. So what here is presented is kind of the high level conclusion, that the acharyas, they analyze the word ekatvam from other occurrences in the Vedas. They look at Panini's grammar to analyze ekatvam, and then come to the conclusion that ekatvam does not mean that everybody is one. That is the Mayavadi. But ekatvam means that there is one entity and everyone else is its attribute. Right? And then there are some practical examples that are given, that if everyone is indeed one, then how can one part of the whole teach the other part of the whole? Right? So if there is a glass of water, and then you put in another glass of water in it, then how can the first glass of water teach the second glass of water? Because they are all the same now. There is no difference between them. But then, if that was true, then there is no point in the Vedas. There is no point in the Lord's instructions. But factually, these teachings are given because there is a distinction between one part and the other part. Right? The second point that is made is, so the Mayavadis say that the jiva is false. Right? Essentially, they say that when the separated Brahman gets covered by Maya, that results in a jiva. So when that separated Brahman is covered by Maya, because that Maya is full of illusion, one can understand that all the realization of the jiva will also be a product of Maya. Yeah. So, which means that all the realizations of the jiva will also be false. Which means that the jiva can never make any progress. Because in that case, the jiva is constitutionally unable to make progress. Like Prabhupada gives the example that when somebody is occupied by a ghost, then the person can never expel the ghost because he is occupied by the ghost. Somebody else outside has to come and chant the mantras to extract the ghost. Right? So that's the weakness of the Mayavad philosophy. That if the jiva is a product of Maya, and if all the jivas are product of Mayas, then all the realizations will be also products of Maya. And having condemned Maya, one cannot say that the products of Maya can take you to a better place. So then the mantra finally says, Koma ka shoka, that one who has that ekatvam vision, for him, what illusion or anxiety? This is a rhetorical question, which essentially means no illusion and no anxiety. Right? And Prabhupada says that essentially the mantra is talking from both perspectives. It is glorifying ekatvam, and it is condemning the absence of ekatvam. Right? So in the presence of ekatvam, one develops a spiritual vision. In the absence of ekatvam, one results in shok and moh, right? Which is illusion and anxiety. So illusion is the erroneous knowledge concerning the jiva's independence. And shoka, it is the erroneous understanding of one's ownership of the material world. Right? So, when one thinks that this thing belongs to me and it is taken away, then there is grief. But why does one think that this belongs to me? Right? That is the erroneous understanding. And moha is the erroneous understanding of the jiva's independence. So knowledge that the Paramatma is the soul of all entities drives away that illusion. The person who sees the one Lord pervading all things, ekatvam anupashyata, suffers no lamentation because he has attained complete lack of possessiveness. Right? So the cause of shoka is possessiveness, and ekatvam, it drives away possessiveness, because in that ekatvam anupashyata one understands that it actually belongs to the Lord. So when one sees the Lord everywhere, the Paramatma, then both moha and shoka disappear. So hatred vanishes when a person sees everything in relationship to Paramatma. Right? And illusion and grief disappear when you see the Paramatma in everyone. So this is combining the two mantras. So Bheda is seeing everything in relationship to the Lord. When you do that, when you understand, right? So a person may be seeing another person and feeling hatred, but then the person comes and says that actually my father is your father. Then that hatred disappears, because now that person is your brother. Right? So when that relationship is understood, then hatred disappears. And abeda is that when one sees the Paramatma in everyone, which means that one relinquishes their ownership. So then this shok and moha disappear. So between the bhed and abhed, then all kinds of suffering disappears. So Pipal Shankar says the Paramatma in whom all beings exist pervades all beings. For the knowing person who sees Vishnu everywhere, what delusion or lamentation can exist, since he attains Vishnu? So conclusion, that the karmis are not aware of the existence of the root and they consider it within themselves, and thus they are in much anxiety. The jnanis, they use the torch of knowledge to seek the root, and thus they are in much anxiety. On the other hand, the devotees, they have been told where the root is, Bhaunam Jamanamante, and they water it and happily eat the fruit of bliss offered by the tree. Right? It's a little metaphorical, poetic way of saying that there's a tree with juicy fruits, right? And the karmis, they're constantly searching for the fruit of the root of the tree, right? And they can't find it, so it creates anxiety in them. Right? And the jnanis, by the torch of knowledge, they are able to seek the root of the tree, but they are not able to do anything beyond that. So that puts them in anxiety. But the devotees, they get a map. They get a map saying this is how the tree is, this is where the root is. You water the root, you get good fruits, you eat the fruit, right? So they simply follow the instructions. So in a more direct way, if you look beyond the metaphors, the result of our activities must be based on a desire to serve the interest of the Lord and no other purpose. So only by serving the Lord's interest we can perceive the Atma Bhuta interest. Right? And then Prabhupada gives two quotes, Bhagavatam 4:30-20 and Bhagavad Gita 1854 about this Atma Bhuta, the Brahman vision. So when one develops the Brahman vision, then one begins to see everything in relationship to the Lord, so that they get unified in terms of interest, relationship and quality. Right? So the three ekatvams automatically manifest at that stage. So the example finally is given that the father extends himself through his children and maintains them in order to derive pleasure. If the children obey the father's will, the family affairs will run smoothly with one interest and a pleasing atmosphere. The same situation is transcendently arranged in the absolute family of Parabrahma, the Supreme Spirit. Prabhupada is giving the example of how in a family, if everybody is aligned in interest to that of the head of the family, and assuming that the head of the family is properly situated, then everything runs smoothly. Similarly, when everybody in this universe aligns their interest to the Lord, and the Lord is of course properly situated, then everything runs smoothly. So this brings us to the conclusion of our mantra 7. So next time we will do mantra 8. Thank you for your interest. Śrīla Prabhupada ki Jai. Hare Krishna.